3 years before Sam Raimi's 2002 film Spider-Man was released to the world, sparking the superhero movie obsession that continues to this day. A different superhero origin story was released. Directed by Brad Bird, who would go on to make The Incredibles, which is one of the greatest animated movies, as well as being one of the greatest superhero movies of all time. But before all that, in the year of 1999, Bird made one of the best superhero origin movies of all time in his directorial debut, The Iron Giant. Today, I want to examine and appreciate the film's masterful visuals, its heartfelt story, and how it functions as a superhero origin story better than most. The Iron Giant combines traditional 2D animation with certain computer-generated imagery. The 2D animation is used to make the film look like it could have been made in 1957, the year in which the story is set. This style makes the film feel like a classic, which makes you nostalgic for the past. This film is beautiful. The impressive natural landscapes of the dense forest, the bright sun rising over the sea, the small charming harbor town. This movie uses its visuals to transport its viewers into the past. Another way this film separates itself from the rest is through its use of light. This is felt most in the heartbreaking deer sequence in which the Iron Giant is taught the fragility of mortal life. These scenes with distinctive lighting make the story feel like Hogarth's memory of childhood, a memory of the past, which the story in many ways is. Lastly is the blending of computer-generated imagery mixed with the traditional style in ways no other film has. The computer-generated animation of the explosions, space scenes, and the Iron Giant's weapons seem futuristic and advanced, not completely fitting in with the overall style. The movie follows 9-year-old Hogarth Hughes, a boy who does not quite fit in. We find out partway through the film that he has skipped a grade and is struggling to find his place among his older peers. This leads him to long for a friend, which brings us to his opening scene. Hogarth resides in a small harbor town called Rockwell. In the opening, we see Hogarth go into the diner where his single mother works to show her his new pet. The pet is a squirrel that gets loose in the diner, causing a mess and getting Hogarth in trouble. This serves to show how both Hogarth causes trouble and does not quite fit in, also that he longs for a friend. That night, Hogarth hears something in the woods and goes after it. Hogarth finds an Iron Giant and they end up at an electrical power plant, in which the giant gets stuck and starts to get electrocuted. Hogarth is going to run away, but because of his compassion for other beings, he goes back and shuts down the plant, saving the Iron Giant. The next day, when he goes looking for it, the giant finds him and drops the shut-off switch next to him, signaling him that he remembers Hogarth saving him. Thus begins their friendship. The Iron Giant crash-landed on Earth, causing a bump on his head, which changes him from a deadly weapon to just another being. As their friendship grows, Kent Mansley, a government agent, grows more suspicious and closer to finding the giant. With a few different sightings of the giant around the town, the citizens grow suspicious as well. Other than Hogarth, no other person in the film has even considered any other course of action than violence and destruction against the Iron Giant. This represents the fallibility of man, the instinctual tendency to act out of fear instead of understanding. It is no coincidence that the character that is shown to be the most ignorant of them all is named Mansley. Hogarth knows that people will not understand the giant, so he hides him. During this time, Hogarth is teaching the Iron Giant through his compassion. When Hogarth shows the giant his comic books, he teaches him about superheroes and how they only use their powers for good, never evil. Hogarth teaches him that he is who he chooses to be. The Iron Giant used to be a weapon. He had no choice in terms of who he was. But when he crashed, he bumped his head, giving him agency over himself, bringing us to what makes him a superhero. In order order to label the Iron Giant as a superhero origin story, it is important to first quantify what it means to be a superhero, and there is no better source than one of the godfathers of the brand. According to Stan Lee in his book, What is a Superhero? A superhero is a person who does heroic deeds and has the ability to do them in a way that a normal person couldn't. So in order to be a superhero, you need a power that is more exceptional than any power a normal human being could possess. And you need to use that power to accomplish good deeds. Otherwise, a policeman or fireman could be considered a superhero. For instance, a good guy fighting a bad guy could just be a regular police story or a detective story, or a human interest story. But if it's a good guy with a superpower who's fighting a bad guy, it becomes a superhero story. If the good guy is doing something that a normal human being couldn't do, couldn't accomplish, then I assume he becomes a superhero. All that applies to the Iron Giant as a character. But the deeds done by a superhero are powerless in the story if they are not first backed up by reasoning of the character. This is what a good origin story should document clearly, which is precisely what the Iron Giant does. Again, the Iron Giant is an alien giant used for war with advanced weaponry that crash lands on Earth. This causes him to bump his head, giving him the ability to choose who he wants to be. He meets Hogarth and they become friends. Hogarth's greatest strength, a strength which nobody else in the movie seems to have, is his compassion for others. He cares for the giant while all the other people would have wanted to attack, again because of the fallibility of man. When Hogarth has to go home, he teaches the giant the term, "Me go, you stay." This was to shelter him from the outside world, which he knew was not ready to accept him. Another important lesson taught to the Iron Giant is the concept of superheroes. The idea that they only use their power for good and never evil, which the giant learns from. Hogarth teaches him, "You are who you choose to be." The giant learns about death in the most beautiful and heartbreaking scene of the film. He and Hogarth spot a deer. The giant is able to touch the deer before it runs off. Then they hear a gunshot in the woods and they find the deer to have been killed by hunters. Hogarth is then forced to explain the concept of life and death to the giant, ensuring he understands it. He sees the gun and it reminds him of his past, making him attack in defense. All of this setup is paid off in the climactic sequence, which we see the giant become a superhero. When the army attacks, he defends himself with all the advanced weapons at his disposal. But Hogarth is able to distract him and bring the real giant back, which he's able to show the town. Out of fear, Kent Mansley orders a missile to strike the town to kill the giant and consequently all the inhabitants. Hogarth explains to the giant that the missile will kill everyone in the town. But instead of letting this happen, the giant tells Hogarth, "Me go, you stay." He then sails into the sky, thinking the phrase, "You are who you choose to be," before colliding with the missile mid-air, saving the town. Through this selfless deed, the Iron Giant becomes who he's chosen to be, who he has become through the lessons of compassion taught to him. He chooses to use his power for good, thus becoming a superhero. This movie clearly separates the Iron Giant from the rest with his extreme power, but it is only through his humanity and care that he is able to save the day.